Hmm. And the great thing about this is that we will email you the recording in the next couple of days. So if you have to leave early, then you can watch the rest of it. And if you would like to ask a question, please look to the bottom of your screens and you can click the chat function. And then in there you can type in your question. For those of you here in the webinar last night, I figured out how to fix it so that everyone can use the chat function. Please make sure that the question is directed to all presenters or all attendees, or I will not be able to see your question. And also, if you would like, please feel free to introduce yourself and let us know what drew you to this webinar, what you're hoping to get out of the webinar. We always like to get an idea of what folks are looking for and why they are interested in this. The webinar will run for an hour with time for questions at the end, but please feel free to type in any questions in the chat box throughout the webinar, and then we'll get to them in the Q&A period at the end of the evening. And if anyone has any technical difficulties, please message me and I'll try to help you figure it out. But before I introduce the panelists, I would like to begin by acknowledging that Green Action Center is located on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. The water we drink comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation on Treaty 3 territory, and the hydroelectricity we use comes from numerous First Nation territories around Manitoba. All right, so we're very lucky to have 3 panelists here with us tonight to chat about food rescue efforts in Winnipeg. So we have my colleague, Ashton Knopfs, Green Audits Project Assistant at Green Action Center. She will first introduce the session with a quick chat about what food waste is and why it's an issue. And then to talk about their work in food rescue and redistribution in Winnipeg, we have Julia Kramer from Leftovers Winnipeg. She has a background in the restaurant industry, community building, and communications. She now manages logistics between food that needs to be eaten today and folks who need to eat today. Julia is the only Winnipeg employee of the Leftovers Foundation and organizes a network of volunteers and community members who help make food move. So I'm assuming she's very busy. She runs the Rescue Food app and the Leftovers Warehouse. And as the daughter of an Italian immigrant, she learned very early that food is a language of love and should be treated as such. While the work of Leftovers Rescue Food will never achieve true food security, Julia believes it is a form of harm reduction. That's definitely something to talk about later on tonight. As well, we have Jill Beauchamp from the Fireweed Food Co-op. They are the food security coordinator there. And Jill has spent their career working with food and doing frontline community work. Their perspective comes from lived experience of food insecurity and a passion for community-centered care focused on mutual aid and harm reduction practices. So I'm very excited to have them both here with us. I think we're going to learn a lot. With that, I will turn it over to Ashton to get the presentation started. So I will stop sharing my screen so that you can do it. Share yours, Ashton.
Okay, hello everybody. As Kristen mentioned, my name is Ashton and I work as a Green Audits Assistant at Green Action Center. And I'm very excited about the panel that we have today. A little outline, I'm going to briefly talk about Green Action Center, what food waste is, and then we're going to have our speakers from Leftovers and Fireweed. And I'm going to start off with a stat just to get everyone thinking about food waste. If global food waste were measured as a country, it would be the world's 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions after China and the US. And a little bit about Green Action Center. We are a nonprofit that promotes greener living, and we do this and we promote slowing down climate change And we do this through environmental education, practical green solutions, and we advocate for policy changes. And we work with households, workplaces, schools, and communities in Manitoba. And we've been doing this for over 35 years. And we have a social enterprise called Compost Winnipeg. And for those who aren't familiar, Compost Winnipeg works with households, schools, restaurants to pick up their kitchen scraps and turn them into a soil amendment. So to help your gardens and produce grow. And we have some different focuses at Green Action Center. We focus on waste reduction, and we do this through the composting program, waste reduction, and First Nations waste minimization. We also have the Sustainable Transportation Program, where they focus on active and safe routes to school, the workplace commuter options, and the annual Jack Frost and Commuter Challenge. And our newest program, which is Sustainability Projects, where we have green audits done at organizations to help them become more sustainable. And that's just a little background information on us. And then Red River Co-op, which this webinar is part of their waste reduction pilot. Red River Co-op has been over the past few years working to reduce their food waste from going to the landfill, and they partnered with Compost Winnipeg to pick up some food scraps to bring to the to get composted. They work with Leftovers Foundation, where edible food gets donated to social agencies to help fight food insecurity, and Loop, where Loop partners with the rural Red River Co-op stores, and farmers can pick up some food for animal feed, as well as Green Action Center, where we've started working with Red River Co-op to find some innovative ways to reduce food waste. And in their St. Vital and Seasons locations, if you've been there, you'll see some signs put up around the store with some food waste tips. So if you haven't, maybe check them out. We also have a webpage with more resources and recipes as well. And since 2021, Red River Co-op has diverted over 540,000 kilograms of food from the landfill, and hopefully that number will keep increasing. So what is food waste? Food waste is the discarding or alternative non-food use of food that is safe and nutritious for human consumption. And there are two types of food waste. There's avoidable food waste, as well as unavoidable food waste. So avoidable food waste is things that you can eat that end up getting thrown out, and unavoidable are things like animal bones, which are not edible. And a little bit about where food waste happens. We have some stats here that just showcase consumers, distribution, production, harvest, and storage, and the processing and manufacturing. And a little bit before that, there's also the difference between food loss and food waste. So food loss is the discarding of food that occurs from production through to processing. And this would include things like edible foods not meeting customer specifications, orders from customers being changed or canceled, and a lack of labor on farms resulting in products being thrown out. As well as food waste, which again is the discarding of food during distribution and marketing to consumers through retail or food service. And this graph, to note, it shows the total amount of food waste in Canada, which is avoidable and unavoidable food waste. And just wanted to note that food waste doesn't only happen in households, it happens throughout all of the different stages that you can see here. So consumers at 27%, that includes households, retail, and restaurants. And food waste here comes from market oversaturation, expansive menu options, preparation mistakes, excess purchases, date codes, and overserving. Distribution at 2% comes from damage, ineffective storage, and packaging. Processing and manufacturing at 47% comes from, the food waste here comes from damages, incorrect ordering, grading, process inefficiencies, label, and packaging. And production, harvest, and storage at 24%. And the food waste here comes from weather extremes, overproduction, food safety scares, incorrect harvesting, spillage, grading standards, and contamination and date codes. And then we just have some food waste stats for Canada. So 58% of food produced in Canada is lost or wasted each year. And of that 58%, 32% of this could be rescued to support communities across Canada, which is what our panelists will be discussing in a little bit. And I'm really excited to learn more. As another stat in 2021, 18.4% of Canadians in the 10 provinces said that they experienced food insecurity in their household. And then this graph is the hierarchy for reducing and recycling food scraps and other organic discards, going from the top, the most preferred, which is source reduction, going to the least preferred at the bottom, which would be food going to the landfill. So this graph just demonstrates that we want to stop food waste at the source. So that would be like harvesting on farms. The second choice would be to reduce food being thrown out at home. And if you are throwing out food at home, it would be going into your residential backyard composting system. And then small scale centralized composting, mechanical mixed waste treatment, and then as a last resort, the landfill. And we should care because reducing food waste would help to address food insecurity. It would protect our planet's resources. You'll become a more conscious consumer, reduce your carbon footprint, and save money and energy. And when you throw out some food, you're not only throwing out the item of food, you're throwing out all of the resources that went out into it, such as the land, which we use to grow the food, the air quality, which are affected by the machines used for farming, which burn gas and pollute the air, fuel from the trucks that move the food, and water, which farmers use the water to help the crops grow. And food waste wastes about a quarter of the world's water supply through uneaten food. So just kind of think about all of the factors that went into the piece of food that you're thinking of throwing out. And with that, I will pass it on to our first panelist, Julia from Leftovers.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen as well. So just give me a moment here.
Okay.
Awesome. Wonderful. Okay, folks. So my name's Julia. I am the Winnipeg City Coordinator for the Leftovers Foundation, and delighted to be here speaking to you today. We are a nonprofit charity that does food rescue and redistribution. As they mentioned, I'm the only local to Winnipeg operations employee, and everything else that happens in our program in this city is through the work of volunteers. So some pretty amazing things happening here. The mission of the Leftovers Foundation is quite simple. It's to reduce food waste and increase food access. So simply put, we save good food from ending up in the landfill and get it to people who are experiencing food insecurity. Good food that needs to be eaten today, brought to people who need to eat today. A seemingly simple solution to a wildly complex problem, two wildly complex problems. So a little bit about us at Leftovers. We were founded in Calgary in 2012 by Lorda Swan. We were incorporated as a nonprofit in 2015 and got our charitable status in 2018. We came to Winnipeg in 2020, right in the height of things. And our mandate is technically poverty reduction, which is quite restrictive, requires charities to collect proof of poverty. This is something that really creates barriers to access for folks who are in need of food. People leaving situations of domestic violence don't have that kind of proof. People who are waiting to be granted refugee status don't always have that either. So people fall through the cracks really quite easily. We kind of help to skirt around this proof of poverty thing by not serving clients directly. And then we live on the edge and prioritize getting food barrier-free to folks, like through Grassroots organization, folks running community fridges, mutual aid, as well as the other charities that are operating in the city. We really do prioritize methods of harm reduction because we believe that food is a basic human right. We are in Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Red Deer, Lethbridge. We've got small operations in Hinton and Airdrie, and thanks to our friends at Red River Co-op, we've just launched softly in Selkirk with their food store there as well. So we attempt to address both food insecurity and climate change. We heard some really shocking statistics already. 1/3 of all of the food wasted in Canada could feed everyone in the country experiencing hunger. And we know that when food rots in the landfill, it produces huge amounts of greenhouse gases. And Ashton really touched on the point of all of the natural resources that go into our food. So it's not just about food. It's about so much more, especially when we're looking at the environmental impact. So we're truly bridging the gaps in our food system on the local level with a community-driven model. So Leftovers has kind of 3 main aspects of our program that help us solve the logistics in the supply chain. So we move unsellable but still good food from donors to service agencies who are assisting people with resources and food insecurity every day. Our agency partners offer food programs of all kinds, anything from school snacks and lunches to meals served in a group home, shelters, drop-ins, food hampers distributed to clients. It's quite diverse. Our 3 main operations here are the Rescue Food app, our large-scale food rescue, which happens through our warehouse, and our seasonal program, which we just launched this past summer in Winnipeg called Home Harvest. So the Leftovers Rescue Food app is free to download in both the App Store and the Google Play Store. All you have to do is create a profile and you're in. It's our volunteer-facing technology. It allows us to organize the logistics of pickup at the food donor business and drop off at the designated receiving service agency. It also does all of our volunteer management, or serves as the tool for volunteer management, and produces user-generated metrics reporting, so we can communicate the impact based on weight and many other factors. The warehouse is a pretty magical space. This is one of the ways we get to some of our agencies who are waiting to get regular rescue food routes on their own, because these donations are huge. Surplus is a word that we like to use when we're talking about food, but it really truly is often large amounts of food. So surplus is totally the right word. Our agencies only need to sign up for a pickup time on distribution day, and they get to come and take what's appropriate for their agency. We have some very large agencies and some very small agencies, so we try and help them in whatever way is right to them. Sometimes donations are large, but they can get out the door fast, or like something that's shelf stable and easy to store. Other things, it's really hard to place, like aging produce or yogurt with a couple days before it's printed best before. So it's quite a diversity. It's always fun, especially when it's locally produced food, like the zucchinis and cabbage and corn in that picture there. Our warehouse space is located in the heart of the North End, 585 Jarvis. This is where all of our large-scale distribution happens. If I'm in office, that's usually where I am, and this is where I get to interact with all of our service agency partners. Ashton touched on this already, some of the primary causes of food waste. One of the ones I think that it's really important to highlight, Ashton's picture had it as well, but ugly produce. We typically in the grocery store don't see the carrots with 5 or 6 legs. covered in dirt, a little hairy, with their strings attached. But this food is just as good, just as nutritious as the perfectly round potatoes or the perfectly straight carrots. Ugly produce isn't common unless you're actually doing the farming and you see how resilient nature truly is. So that's one of the ones that especially in our learnings over the summer with this seasonal program, ugly produce just totally deserves to be seen. I assure you that this is an unedited photo. This is actually what the potato looked like, but ugly produce turns into sad potatoes. Potatoes want to be taken home and used, not left. Jill will be able to tell you lots about ugly veggies. Here we go. Another aspect of what we do is recognizing what a best before date is. These dates don't necessarily have to do with food safety. They have more to do with food quality and manufacturer standards. They are most of the time not expiry dates, and food can be eaten past these printed dates. The example that you would have in your own home is, do you throw out the milk when it comes to date, or do you open the pack and sniff it, right? You open the carton and take a whiff, or you pour it into your coffee and you learn, right? Just because it says a date doesn't necessarily mean that's the exact moment it's going to turn or spoil or no longer be safe to consume. Food safety and food handling really are two of the more important things than the date. So who donates food to us? First and foremost, we'd like to thank our sponsors for today, who are great supporters of the Leftovers Foundation. Red River Co-op, all of their food stores donate to us every single day. All of the stores in Winnipeg, and as I mentioned, we're in their Selkirk store now. They help us not only with food donations and donating their surplus food to help reduce their waste footprint, but in other ways as well. So they're really quite an amazing organization. Red River College, their culinary program, there's often surplus either made in a classroom or through their student-led cafe and restaurant. So they are a sporadic donor. Some folks are shocked to hear that the food bank sometimes needs help with food recovery. They do close for a couple days over the weekend, and they don't want food to go to waste either. So we help with some recovery there. Guns Bakery, Modern Cafe, a couple names. Obviously not everybody here. This isn't exhaustive. But it's not just food donors or food vendors who are saving food from dropping through the gaps. We also recover food from service agencies, from our agency partners, when they have a donation that they receive that isn't right for their clientele or just too big, or they don't have enough space to store it. They know that they can reach out to us and we'll help get it to another agency who can use it. Speaking of folks who use our food, who receive food from us, this is not an exhaustive list, of course, as well. I've got about 120 different service agencies on our roster, service agencies, schools, daycares, mutual aid groups, outreach groups. We get as far out into community as we can, but a couple logos that hopefully you'll recognize and maybe have supported already. These folks are doing amazing work, truly on the front lines in terms of helping our community. What we do is just a very, the way we help them is a very small part of their operations. Food in addition to housing resources, food in addition to crisis management, food in addition to harm reduction supplies. These folks are doing some really important things. Next, I'll tell you about Home Harvest. This is our newest program, newest to Winnipeg. We launched this year. It's a backyard produce recovery program, so it works very similarly to the rescue food program, operates through our app. You would sign up to volunteer to do a harvest. Most of the time, this is picking a tree or cutting rhubarb, any kind of homegrown produce that won't be used. We know most homes can't use the yield of their whole apple tree, let alone 3. So why let that fruit sit on the ground to rot when it can be picked, recovered, and shared. So we launched this year. It runs from June to October. Harvests organized through the app and then taken to a designated service agency, and then leftover supports with the supplies that you'd need and all the logistics management. We had way more interest in donating food than we had enough folks to go and actually pick the trees. So we are looking for folks to volunteer with this. So I'm just going to pop something in the chat in case you would like to register your interest volunteering with that program. So at the heart of what Leftovers does, we mobilize community to help offset the labor hours, cost, logistics associated with acquiring food donations for community service agencies. And we really put that, on the shoulders of community members who have the time, the privilege, the capacity to be able to contribute in this way. One of the things that we touched on already about this initiative is the idea of food security. Food security, the true definition of food security is the condition in which all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So folks ask, do you think that rescued food will help achieve food security? The answer truly is no. Food security means, oh, my apologies, I will get the right link. But true food security is when folks get to choose for themselves, and our food donations will never be first choice food. So we can talk a little bit more about that in the question period. Another premise I really love is the 5 A's of food security: availability, accessibility, adequacy, acceptability, and agency. They're kind of explained in that definition, but having all aspects of this is true food security. Folks often ask as well, is Winnipeg a food secure community? The answer is unfortunately no. There are food deserts in our city. When we're talking about Manitoba at large, it gets harder and harder to achieve true food security, the further outside of the city center that you go. But there are a lot of players working in this field, trying to help folks, and there are some solutions that we can put into place. Harvest Manitoba reported recently, food bank usage has doubled since 2019. 25% of food bank clients are people with jobs. So it's not as simple as just go make some money. The number of 2-parent families using food banks increased by 36.5% in the past year. Over 41% of recipients are Indigenous, which, if we flash back to pre-colonization, First Peoples were food secure without any of the technology that we now have. So this is an unacceptable statistic. We really need to work to decolonize our food system, and I think Fireweed will tell us a little bit more about some of the ways we can help to do that. And then approximately 40,000 food bank clients are served monthly. That's a lot of Manitobans. Rescued food will never solve food insecurity, but it's a darn good way to help. It's an act of harm reduction. recognizing that there's harm inherent in the way our current food landscape operates, and trying to connect to really stupid problems, things that we really should prioritize for our communities. We're trying to bridge those gaps. I'll say again, food insecurity is not about food, it's about income. The bottom line on food insecurity is that it's not about just being able to go and find food, right? People need to be able to buy it for themselves. Consistent government income supplements like the old age security and the Canada Child Benefit reliably reduce food insecurity, but households accessing government social supports like EI are at an increased risk of food insecurity because these supports tend to experience more frequent reductions, and most provinces don't index them to inflation. So costs rise, and supports remain the same. Here's some of the good we've done. Last year in Winnipeg, we had over 2,600 volunteer hours spent with leftovers in Winnipeg. Food from 57 food donors delivered to 95 service agencies, providing over 460,000 meals. Over 539,000 pounds of good food was rescued in Winnipeg alone, and this translates to over 300,000 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions prevented. So there really is, some tangible impact that we can have. It just takes some logistics. It takes some working together, some community creation, and a little bit of creativity. Last thing I'll leave you with is how can you get involved with us? There are quite a few ways. Follow us on social media. That's the easiest one to do. Just search the Leftovers Foundation on your favorite platform and you'll find us. Tell your friends or your favorite food business about us. Download and register our app to start volunteering. Come volunteer with us at the warehouse. Donate funds to help keep us operating. And if you have another idea or a special skill that you possess, or maybe you know someone in the right field, get in touch. We would love to have you share your gift with us. And dropping one more, we are having a fundraiser. I'd be amiss to not announce that, November 14th. So come out and support us in person if you can. I will stop sharing my screen and I believe pass it straight over to my friend Jill.
Hello. Hey everyone. So I work for Fireweed Food Co-op. Fireweed was formerly Farm Fresh Food Hub. It's a nonprofit co-op that's composed of producers who are small farmers who do sustainable farming, as well as some folks in the city, people who were involved in farmers markets and other food systems that are currently happening in the city. So the Fireweed exists to cover a few different bases. So we operate the South Osborne Farmers Market, which some of you may be familiar with. We also operate a food hub to connect our producer members with folks in the city so that our producers have more time to focus on sustainability, farming, which they're better at than we are, and just generally like do what they're good at, and we will help them do distribution and that kind of thing in the city so that they don't have to do that themselves, and it's a very mutually beneficial thing. And the third thing sort of we encompass is food security, which is my job. So food security from Fireweed is I operate something called the Veggie Van. So the Veggie Van is I don't have as fancy of a PowerPoint as Julia has, so I just have notes here. So the Veggie Van is basically a mobile farmers market. So it aims to increase access to locally grown produce within communities and neighborhoods in Winnipeg who are experiencing high levels of food insecurity. So Julia was mentioning there's a thing called the food audit that happened. There's a map online that you can access that sort of shows like what the geographic spread of food insecurity in Winnipeg kind of looks like. So like downtown and the north end and the west end, Elmwood, there's a lot of places in Winnipeg that are considered food insecure by like basically like standards that have been, I don't know, created by some global person. But okay, so Veggie Van is really tight. I basically get produce from our co-op members who are farmers. We buy it at a cost that will sustain their farms, their families, so they can keep farming for us. And then we go get it subsidized. So I contact people who are like organizations who, I don't know, will donate money and do sponsorships for that kind of thing. I contact MLAs and that kind of thing as well. People who can give us donations in order to subsidize the food. So the way the Veggie Van works is I partner with several organizations across the city in these core areas that are experiencing really high levels of food insecurity. I bring a van full of vegetables and a tent and a table, and I set up essentially what is like a market stand so that the folks in these areas who are already accessing these community services can come and access vegetables basically for free. So the way we operate it is a pay what you can model, but we're not going to turn anybody away for if you have nothing, because the point of what we're doing is not to make a bunch of money from folks. It's to make sure that folks have access to like locally grown fresh produce from who that's organically grown by people on like sustainable small scale farms. And yeah, it's just been a really it's been a really interesting year. It's been really well received so far. And community participation has been really encouraging. The other thing that I do for food security work is the Waste Not program, which is sort of more what I'm going to talk about. So the way the Waste Not program works, I believe it was started just like mid-pandemic, maybe 2020, in partnership with Mutual Aid Society as like a hamper distribution program. It has evolved out of that since things have changed in the world over a little bit. So now the way that it works is anything, if we have donations from our producers or producers have food like, peak zucchini season, they have so many gigantic zucchinis and they're like, we don't want this food to go to waste. So we find homes for it. So my job in being connected with all of these community partners, I have a lot of connections within the community. I have connections through like very grassroots organizations like Mutual Aid Society, as well as from like volunteering and working in community gardens. So yeah, so I through this like vast wide network of people that I've met doing Veggie Van and doing other work, we find places for the food to go. So just for example, some of the food comes from producers donating it directly. Some of it comes from the South Osborne Farmers Market. Producers, like food producers there, will put together a few boxes of stuff at the end of the market that didn't sell or that they know, needs to go out to folks. Excuse me. And the other place is the Veggie Van, but the reality is that we have not really had like leftover food after the Veggie Van because people, the buzz around it has been good, I guess, and we've been selling out every stop, so that's been really wonderful. Yeah, so the Waste Not program sort of operates like on a whole, like a wide range of different things, like scales of how we distribute it. So just for some small examples, sometimes I will have like maybe like a handful of beets and some peppers and some Swiss chard left after a Veggie Van that didn't sell. It's just like very small amounts of items. So generally when I have a smaller quantity like that, I will go drop it off in the community fridge. that is, it's just off Notre Dame between Sherbrooke and Maryland. And it's connected, I think right now the people organizing it and like looking after it is SNA, and they have a community greenhouse right there. So I drop stuff off in the community fridge. Sometimes we have a little extra stuff, so I can roll up to West Central Women's Center, for instance, or North Point Douglas Women's Center, and just bring food into their drop-ins, where people who are already hanging out, community members who are needing to access services already are, and people are happy to take free vegetables. I've never rolled up somewhere and had folks be like, no, don't give us these free things. Like that's never happened. And I have a few connections of people who like are like tenant organizers in low-income buildings, subsidized housing, low-income like seniors housing, Greenheart Housing Co-op. It's a lot of like green co-op things happening, but they so I just call them and say, hey, I have this food, and then I bring it to them. And I was talking a bit with a coworker earlier about how it's hard to describe exactly what happens and the exact process, because it's different depending on the quantity of food we have to donate, what kind of food we have to donate. Like people don't necessarily want like a 10-pound zucchini, right? And we get big zucchinis like this. But another thing that Fireweed does is connect with places like Leland North School, who have chickens, I believe. I think I see what Ashley Taylor in here somewhere. But we will donate like produce to like their chickens. So for example, after Veggie Van, I had a bunch of people didn't want their carrot tops, their carrot greens. And so what we did was we collected them in a bag and we put them in one of our freezers, and we gave them to Leland North School to feed their chickens. So the way that Fireweed operates is honestly, like, I think we have an almost zero food waste margin. And it's been like very grassroots, the way we distribute things, very like community organized. I feel like Julia's very because Leftovers is a larger organization, there's a little more like I don't know, method to the madness of how they distribute the food. But with Fireweed, we're very much just like relying on our like existing community connections and building new community connections through things like Veggie Van, which is kind of an outreach program. We're bringing food to people as opposed to needing people to come to us. One of the things about Veggie Van also is like Julia did mention, like with leftovers stuff, there isn't a lot of like choice around what gets donated and stuff, whereas the Veggie Van model operates sort of to provide autonomy of choice around what food people are accessing, because it operates as a market essentially, so that different people with different food security needs can access different kinds of food. And yeah, I think we really employ that also through the Waste Not things, knowing that different groups of folks are needing different things for food security. We work with places that also like cook meals for folks. So like Norwest Community Food Center, which provides hot meals for people for free. If we have produce that, if we have like a bunch of something that can go into a food that can be served to people, that's like another great connection that we can basically call them up and be like, hey, we have this food, can you use it? Will you be able to give it out? And overwhelmingly the response has been yes. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Okay, do want to say one thing, one other thing related to what Julia was talking about, ugly veggies. Fireweed has these bags that say, I love ugly veggies. because that is, you know, we get stuff from small producers and people who are growing food like organically on their farms. And so the food that we distribute is very much just like, you know, it looks like it looks real, as opposed to like all your carrots being the exact same like shape and size. But yeah, so Waste Not is sort of a like I keep track of how much food is donated and where it's donated to. Um, but otherwise, like there's not a lot of specific uniformity to it beyond our just like community connections that we've established throughout the time of like Fireweed existing, as well as just like through different staff members. But yeah, it's really wonderful.
I feel, Jill, to me, you sound like a mini Leftovers Foundation. You're doing all of the work that the Leftovers volunteers do on a smaller scale, hey?
We're not necessarily receiving donations from like big places. Our donations are from the small producers that we work with. And we also like the veggie van, we buy the vegetables from them at cost that will sustain them, right? So because recognizing that we need to like stimulate that local economy, and also like we want to encourage the success of these small sustainable farms, because they are definitely have much better like climate policies. That's a wrong word. Climate like
Practices, like yeah.
And like yeah, we just want to encourage that, and make sure that they continue to succeed in their work. So that's definitely a big part of it.
For sure. And you were saying that you use donations from various organizations to help subsidize that. I noticed that there's a certain schedule in certain areas where you have the veggie van. Do you have hopes of expanding that? And I think, of course, it all depends on donations, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, not just that, but like we, you know, the position of food security for Fireweed is through grants. There was a food security grant that came out post-COVID that is funding my job right now. But the reality being that like smaller grassroots food security or like food organizations in general, not just food security organizations, don't get the same kind of funding as like Manitoba Harvest, for instance. And so, you know, at the end of October, my contract is over for the year, and I have to find some food security, or, you know, maybe I'll just like work at a coffee shop for a few months. But I'm very passionate about the Veggie Van project. It's something that's like close to my heart, as well as just something that like is very important in the world, matters to me, matters the community and like the people I've met through it. And like the work that I do is just like, you know, it feeds my soul. It's a good it's a really lovely time. And you know, no, like I kind of said earlier, no one is like pissed or angry at you for showing up with free food. Like no one's ever upset about that. No one's like, oh, how dare you do this. So, it's a pretty overwhelmingly positive response from folks, because food connects all of us. Every single person on the whole entire planet eats food, needs to eat food. And you know, it's something that like we can connect with people on, even if those folks are just like living such drastically different lives as us, or are in communities that we aren't connected to at all in our own lives. Everyone needs to eat. So
for sure. Yeah. And I know what you mean. Like working nonprofits, we do it because we love it. And it's, yeah. And so, I guess you're saying the challenge of funding, and
yeah.
I feel like with food rescue efforts and food security work, it's very grassroots, you know, kind of scrambling, doing the best you can. And I guess that brings me to the question of like, what role do you think the government should play in helping to reduce food waste, and also increasing food security among Manitobans. So those are, I find those like food waste and food security, as you said, Julia, they're very tied together, and it's a very complex problem, as you mentioned before. Like, is there anything that they could do to make your jobs more effective and easier as well? This is a multifaceted question.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, they could.
I think firstly, government needs to view food not only as a human right, but as a guaranteed basic need. No one should have to struggle to find food to eat in this country of abundance, in this province of abundance. We need to move away from charity models and remove the us versus them mentality about food insecurity, because we're all just a couple of bad days away from being in that situation, a couple of wrong circumstances. You know, disability can come to anyone at any point in time, and you know, we don't know what we're not experiencing it, you know, until we experience. So really just removing the us versus them mentality. And then we really need community centered resources and person-centered resources to be fully funded. Not only do we need housing, but we need housing with supportive services. Not only do we need you know, recovery programs, but we need recovery programs with steps to how people will rebuild their lives after they get out of recovery. Person-centered, community-centered, really all people should be able to purchase their own first choice food. So universal basic income, of course, is one solution that we know post-pandemic we can do. Mandating the donation of surplus food with guidance from experts in the field about donation parameters and safety, and then systemizing it. And then I also think that food waste shouldn't be hitting the landfill. We need both a commercial and a residential compost system. We at Leftovers are so grateful for Compost Winnipeg and Green Action Centre for the service they provide to us. But in Manitoba, we are just behind the, you know, other parts of the country and other parts of the world in organics diversion. Compost Winnipeg does some amazing things in market spaces where they do drop-off, compost drop-off events. And if we could make that something that was accessible in every single neighborhood, you know, that changes a lot of what's happening in the province.
It's actually something that they're looking to do as well.
We know. Oh, we know.
Okay, great.
and then, of course, pushing for a more localized food system for sustainability. I mean, Fireweed Food Co-op are clearly the leaders in this work. They really are doing things right, and not just supporting the local food economy, but supporting a local food economy that is regenerative and sustainable.
Yeah. So many things. Hey, Jill, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I mean, universal basic income was going to be the first thing that I said. The reality is just that, like, people actually don't have, like, we don't have to choose between hydro bills and food because of the quantity of food that is out there. The only thing that is making people choose between paying their bills and food is, like, is capitalism. And the, you know, general assistance, like what I've done a lot of, I did a bunch of surveys at the end of Veggie Van, sort of asking people, like, you know, who lives in your household? How many people are you accessing food for? Do you have children? Do you have someone with a disability? Do you have folks over like a certain age, like elderly folks living with you? And overwhelmingly, all of those three factors are true in the people who are like the most food insecure in the city. And I think that's very telling, especially in regards to like folks on disability, as to like how the government has like left those people behind as far as just very basic like human rights and like human needs. And so like universal guaranteed basic income, and also just like, I don't know, someone needs to like get rid of the guy who's in charge of all the superstores and stuff. That guy who's like cut like that CEO who's stealing all of the money and raising all of our food prices. Someone needs to do something about that.
Yeah, for sure. It's a huge monopoly and it causes a huge issue.
Companies, like big businesses, need to be held accountable for stuff like that,
Yeah.
especially because it is like food is a human right, and like no one should have to choose between like housing and food, or like paying for your child to go to daycare and food. Like those are not
Clothes.
anyone should have to make, just period. And so
Yeah.
I think that there is ways to make it so that people have access to food, have access to their choice of food, have access to culturally relevant food, have access to different kinds of food security. So for example, me bringing vegetables to different neighborhoods is not food security for everyone. If you have like, I don't know, 5 kids, you don't have time to think of meals to cook with the like different vegetables I give you. It's much more useful to get maybe things that are pre-made, or maybe things that are pre-prepared. Something I defend a lot as far as food security is things like those, like you order meals online and they deliver you meals and they give you the recipe and everything. And I think people are kind of like shit on that a little bit, but I think that's a very interesting way of upping your personal food security, is like recognizing that you don't necessarily have the currency that is like time to prepare food, or to like think of what to cook, right? Like I think even those of us who, maybe have a little more like wiggle room as far as time, as far as energy, it's hard to know what to cook every single day anyways. And so, if you add other barriers on top of that, that's a huge chunk of time, of mental energy that you're thinking of. So just the government's recognition that like food security looks different for different groups of people, and supporting grassroots organizations that are already doing like the food security work that like needs to happen, divesting from charity models, big time divesting from charity models. We know like it has been proven that charity models do not actually increase food security within neighborhoods. People don't have like autonomy over what they're choosing. Often people receive things that are just like not useful to them and end up in the garbage anyways. And so I don't think that that's a very waste reduction way of operating food security work. We can give hampers to people, but at the end of the day, we don't know that those are the foods that they would choose. Often, I don't think they are. Often people end up with
a can opener. What if you don't have a can opener at home?
what
like,
if
there's so many barriers.
Jars of peanut butter, right? Like, I eat a lot of peanut butter, but I don't eat that much. And like, I've also heard directly from community members like talk about like receiving certain things in hampers where they're just like, what on earth what am I going to do with that? And then the result is that it gets thrown away. And so divesting from hamper models, charity models, can also reduce food waste.
For sure. And I think just to wrap things up, there's so many things we could talk about. It's even just the fact that like the fact that there's waste from grocery stores and restaurants, that's an issue there right already, and from farms. And it's like, okay, that's great that it's being donated to folks in need, but it's just kind of the scapegoat a bit too. It's like, here, you need food, just we'll give it to you and it's fine. But as you mentioned, food security means different things to different people. And it's really, it's the best thing we can do with it right now, but it's not the answer for sure. But what you're doing is amazing work. And thank you so much for coming and telling us about all the work you're doing and all like the really hard work you're doing, and we really appreciate it. And hopefully down the road there'll be some new policies coming along eventually with climate change, food security. We're the hopeful people anyway. So
I'm just seeing there's a Q&A question that someone typed in.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay.
I know that we're a little out of time, but most people seem to still be here. Do you mind?
Yeah, not at all. Okay, so did you read it already, Jill?
No, I've read it, but if you want to read it out loud, go for it.
Yeah, I'll read it out loud. Okay, so this question was, can you talk about the role of education and lack of it in food insecurity and food waste? Example, lack of knowledge in how to cook prevents people from buying low-cost nutritious groceries like lentils, rice, and beans, or from being able to use vegetables like a large zucchini. Lack of knowledge about best before dates leads people to throw things out rather than using their nose, etc. Do you have links with community organizations that provide food education? That's a great question.
So Norwest Community Food Co-op does food education stuff. Leland North School, as we name dropped earlier, does some really interesting stuff and does like food education as well as like sustainability education and things about like regenerative practices. So the answer is that we absolutely can change the way that we educate our children to like in order to be better with food waste. We can, have better access to things like cooking classes. We can have better access to like funding things like kitchens in schools, like teaching kitchens in schools, not just like a cafeteria kitchen, as well as like organizations partnering with like places like high schools and that kind of thing for any volunteer work we need. Is always a great thing. It helps us get some of the like heavy lifting that we often need help with done, but it also exposes like youth to the kind of like grassroots organizations and food saving initiatives that are already happening. I think definitely like education can make a massive difference. But the other thing, like we can educate people on how to cook, we can educate people on how to save food and reduce waste and compost and that kind of thing. But the reality also we need to recognize is that like within capitalism, people don't have time often for that kind of thing. And so, along with educating people, we need to provide livable basic income so that people can have the time to do things like that. When you have the time to like sit and eat a meal with your family that you've cooked with them, that's such a different feeling than having to like rush to feed people just because you need to get food in your bodies to keep going. And so as much as like we can, we want the government to fund like education and education around like food waste, climate change, sustainability, etc. We also need those like kids to grow up and not have to work multiple jobs to pay for their 1-bedroom apartment. So
yeah, that's the thing. We live in such a fast society because we have to. Like I'm even lucky. Like I have a partner and we have 2 young kids. And we both have jobs, and I have way more support than other people do. But we even produce a lot of food waste because, again, the lack of time, and like we don't have a village. We don't have the supports to really help us be able to do those things that I used to do before kids. And I can't imagine a single parent or someone who's living in poverty or like, so it's society and the way it's built, and that just makes it hard for everyone to be able to take the time to cook your meals, be conscientious of your waste and such. So that's a really good point. Yeah oh yeah okay. I know we could go on forever.
Definitely.
Totally. Well, I really want to again thank you two so much for coming. I learned a lot and I'm excited. We will definitely let folks know about the Harvest at Home program too, because Fruit Share ended a couple years ago and everyone's been asking us if it's still around and people were sad about it. So hopefully we can get some more volunteers for that. And yes, as I mentioned, we will send out the recording, and Jill and Laura, if you have any links, to just send it to us and we'll include that in the...
Yeah, so I was gonna just do a quick little shout out. So like it is the end of farmers market season, and so folks have been accessing farmers market food because you want to buy locally, you want to support locally. Guess what? You can continue to do that in the winter through fireweed.
Yahoo!
So we operate an individual household buying club. So the way it works is you can sign up online and you can place an order, and you have access and then there's a few different like pickup spots, but basically you can buy and access all of that like nice farmers market produce, like farmers market eggs, locally produced butter and cheese. You can get all of those things over the winter when there aren't farmers markets happening. So if you want to support like small sustainable local farms through fireweed, that's one way to do it. It's also just like nice to have access to that food because it tastes better.
And you feel better about it too. Awesome. We'll include that link send that link to us, and then we'll send it to everyone else. Okay. Well, Jill and Julia, thank you very much. Thank you to Red River Co-op for sponsoring this, and I'd like to wish everyone a good night, and take care, everyone. See you later.